All right, guys, welcome to another open line Q&A. We're going to do a quick market update. I'm calling this this is pretty much going to be the Thanksgiving market update around that time. So there's so much going on right now. The market is absolutely insane. If you're new tuning in, make sure you like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Click the links in the bio to tap into the free real estate trainings that'll show you how to acquire properties for pennies on a dollar all across the country. Enough of that. Let's dive right into some of these market updates, right? So first off, from a macro level, we have a lot of impact from the Fed activity that's been going on. So we know the Fed's been increasing rates. They're increasing rates. Why? Because they want to really drive down investment demand. They want to curb the availability of capital of all of this cash flow that has been flooded in over the last 2 years with all these stimulus packages because it has pretty much just led to massive inflation. So as they're trying to curb inflation, they're increasing the rates, but it's having a large impact on a lot of different areas. So we're starting to see this Fed activity is actually pushing unemployment upwards, right? So the unemployment rate is it's increasing. People are losing their jobs. There's been a lot of recent layoffs that we shouldn't necessarily be alarmed by. I mean, to some degree, we've expected a lot of these layoffs, but let's talk about some of the, I mean, more recent ones. Like there was just an announcement earlier today that Amazon is set to lay off about 10,000 people. So that's going to have a pretty big impact. I mean, even if I think about a lot of tenants that I have, there are a lot of workforce tenants that drive for Amazon, work at the factories. Amazon has created a lot of jobs across the country in the last, I mean, for a long time, but definitely the last 5 to 10 years. Definitely during the pandemic, when a lot of companies were doing poorly, Amazon was doing great, right? They're just drop shipping straight to your door. So even when things were getting shut down, their business picked up. A lot of jobs were created. A lot of people were working there. So it was really good. 10,000 layoffs. Twitter had massive layoffs. Facebook massive layoffs. If you're working in the mortgage industry, there have been massive layoffs throughout the mortgage industry. So we're just seeing a lot of job loss. And what that means for us as investors is there's going to be a lot of foreclosure pressure. There's going to be pressure selling coming up going into 2023 as we get deeper into it because some of the people that are losing their jobs, especially in this tech space, some of these are higher paying jobs. Some of these are programmers. I actually got hit on LinkedIn by like a post from a engineer, like a programmer, and it's just like guy was working for Facebook, got hit with the layoffs. That stuff happens, and those are higher earning jobs. When that happens, there can be pressure selling. So you're going to see a lot of pressure selling in a lot of different markets. That's going to be driving some investor inventory if you know how to get in front of motivated sellers. If you don't, you need to tap into some of these mentorship courses and start to learn how to position yourself a little bit better to take advantage of some of these opportunities. So just know unemployment upticks means foreclosures, pressure selling. So that's an investor opportunity on the other side. We're seeing rates are already, like I've been talking, rates are going to come down. Rates are going to come down. We're seeing rates are coming down a bit. So over the last week, rates have on a 30-year fix and have ticked down a bit in response to positive data from the inflation data is showing that inflation is pulling back a bit. It's not at a complete about face or something where we can pound on the table and say, oh, we're out of this thing. Inflation is just going down and that's it. But the data has been positive, and we're seeing an immediate response in the reflection of rates being adjusted downward, partially because the mortgage industry has been taking a hit. In terms of that data, there's a 25% reduction in refinance activity year over year. So the amount of refinances that were happening, and that was a big driver of profitability for mortgage brokerages, that's down 25% and is going to continue to decrease as rates continue to fluctuate. They pulled back a little bit. Maybe they'll go back up. We don't quite know where they'll be at the end of the day. But just know that That activity being down, that was the big profit maker for a lot of mortgage brokerages. They're just calling existing clients saying, "Hey, you want to refi? You can save a lot of money on your monthly payment," and that was an easy way to get new origination fees and just make money. So a lot of that has gone away, and there's going to be more layoffs because of it. They got to trim costs. That's the only way to increase profits to a degree. Is one is to sell for more. Two is to just cut your costs down and run a leaner ship. And then purchase mortgages have declined by about 3%, nationally. So that not as much, and that should be a shocker for some of us because um, the big kind of talk on the town, I'd say, with real estate, if you listen to any type of real estate talk, has been that people are just going to stop buying. Like rates are up, they're 7%. People aren't going to buy. People are still buying. New mortgage purchases on the buy side down 3%. So it's really the refi industry that's getting crushed and getting killed, and that is hurting the profitability for mortgage brokers. People are still buying into this market. Um, with that being said, the housing stock is going to be a bit constrained going into 2023. Outside of this foreclosure pressure, people losing their jobs, there will be pressure selling for investors who are more sophisticated and know how to get in front of motivated sellers. The housing stock will be a bit constrained because you also have these other people who would be sellers, right? So you have would be sellers who are going to keep their property because they're looking and they're saying, I would sell my property today, like in a heartbeat, but what can I buy? With rates being this high, with pricing being where it is, what can I buy? And when they're faced with that choice, they just stay put. They just don't put their property on the market because they have nowhere to go. Rents are up. Prices are actually pretty stable, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Shockingly, prices are stable. We'll talk about that next, but they don't have anywhere to go. So if you don't have anywhere to go, you stay put in your property. You don't put it on the market, and that leads to property availability for investors being lower or artificially lower than they otherwise would be in a market that is not kind of in a recession or in an increasing rate market. So we're dealing with this as investors. So it's just something to be aware of. If you're going and looking for properties on the market or on the MLS, and you're like, hey, I'm not seeing anything. There might be some slow weeks. You have to stay tapped in and just keep looking day by day. Good deals are going to hit the market, but you have to scoop on them very quickly. Like you have to get to these good deals fast in 24 to 48 hours. You have to have your systems together because inventory is still constrained in a lot of markets, especially in the Northeast, in some of the markets that pricing has been the most stable. So shockingly, this is in terms of price stability. People will be shocked by this. Home prices rose year over year, and this is factoring in November, right? Part of this update. Home prices have risen year over year in 98% of metro areas for the third quarter of 2022. 98%. So almost 100% of metro areas across the country. Home prices have actually continued to rise, even into now, into these rates. So they're not rising as fast as they were. They're kind of barely upticking now, whereas a year ago they were just going through the roof in some of these markets, up 20-30%. But know that in metro areas, that's telling us that the demand, if you want to be safe, so let's talk about it that way. If you want to invest in areas that are safe, where you're not going to lose your money or you're not going to be worried about major price fluctuations and all these things happen, invest in major metros, invest in major cities because people are moving back. There was a flow away from the city when COVID originally hit. There was a big flow away. Hey, I want to get more space. I want to get away from people. The cities were shut down anyway. So when the nightlife is shut down, the city doesn't look as great, right? So people are just getting out of town. Now people are coming back to the city, and people are getting called back. Like Elon Musk sends out a tweet, yo, you work for Twitter, I need everybody back in the office. People are going from, moving back home with their parents or moving out down south to Florida to hang out on the beach and work on their laptop to now being called back to the city, called back to the office. So demand is coming back into the cities, and this is part of the reason why the cities are very strong in terms of pricing. So it's just something something to be aware of, and know that that price stability is definitely still there. I gotta mute some people because I'm getting feedback. So prices are stable. They're shockingly more stable than I would say any of us would have predicted right now. And it's not that prices aren't going to go down and continue to go down, but they're just not. I wouldn't necessarily expect this like you're going to go to sleep and then you're going to wake up and prices are down 40% in a market or 30% in a market. Prices are going to go down a lot slower than anticipated, just because of some of these other macro influences that are happening right now. Um, One thing for my commercial real estate people, because I always get this question, Brian, what about commercial real estate? Why don't you invest more in commercial real estate? Isn't that better than multis? Isn't that part of scaling up? Commercial real estate is getting crushed. Commercial real estate right now is getting crushed harder than residential. Small businesses, I mean, if you think about it, small businesses, a lot of these businesses are dependent upon cheap money. They need cheap capital to keep the lights on, to keep growing, to buy more inventory, to have product. And we're talking about these strip malls and the people who would rent out space in these strip malls and have physical inventory. They're getting crushed because now the cost to borrow capital has increased. It's doubled. It's going from 3.5% to 7% on them too, or relatively, based upon the rates that they would pay. So because those borrowing costs are going up across the board, money is becoming more expensive. They can't afford the rent. They quite simply can't afford the rent. A lot of this inventory is just sitting vacant, and as it sits vacant for longer, it loses the resale value because it's just like, who wants to buy some commercial building that they can't tenant, and then it's just sitting there bleeding money, and they're hoping that the market comes back, but maybe it never does. Maybe people just keep ordering stuff online and strip malls just stay tapped out. Like, we really don't know, right? So commercial real estate is getting absolutely clobbered, and they're feeling kind of what some of the people thought the residential market would feel. They're actually feeling it on the commercial side. um, we have some top 10 areas in terms of the metro areas that have experienced the largest price increases. 7 out of the top 10 metro areas that have experienced the largest price increases year over year into Q3 of 2022, 7 of them are in Florida. So a lot of my Florida people who are just looking and, hey, I want to move to Florida. I want to live in Florida. I want to invest in Florida. The Florida area is still hot. It's still increasing. Out of the top 10, 7 of those are in Florida. The other three, one's in North Carolina, one's out in LA. So these markets they're still increasing. So you just have to stay tapped into the data and keep watching it. I'm not saying that Florida won't present some good buying opportunities in the very near future, but where we're at right now, we just need to, keep an eye on things or look to invest out of town. And I'm a big proponent, for those who know me, of investing out of town. I've built hundreds of properties at least 2 state lines away. I always will preach to you, any smart money manager will tell you to invest where your money goes further. The best stock managers, the best stock pickers, what they do is they buy securities that are undervalued, and then they hold them until they reach their inherent value, and then they sell them. And that's the profit that they make. Buy it low, wait until it returns to inherent value, and then sell it. Inherent value in real estate, how you think about that is, what's the cost of bricks? What's the cost of a brick structure? So if I can go into, let's say if I can go into Columbus, Ohio, and I can buy a brick building for $30,000. If you went and bought a plot of dirt somewhere, anywhere in the country, and you tried to brick up a 2-story, 1,200 square feet building, you're going to spend more than $30,000 just to get a shell, just to dig out a basement, brick it up, the labor. You might spend more than $30K on just the materials. So you start to look at the inherent value of the building, no matter where it's located within the country. If the inherent value of the building is $90,000 and it's located in Cleveland and it's selling for $30,000, logic would tell you that at some point in the next 30 years, there's a strong chance that this property will go back to its natural value, which will be just the cost to build it. Just that basic cost, which might be like 170,000, 175,000. So investing with that type of logic can make you a lot of money long term. This is how people make a lot of profitability within C-class neighborhoods versus people who are like, I only buy in the A-class, I only buy in Center City, I know the value. They'll buy a freaking 2 cap, a 3 cap. Whereas a lot of people will buy in the C-class knowing they can get it at 50,000, but it has a higher chance of tripling or quadrupling in value, being worth 200,000 10, 15 years from now, than the property that was purchased in Center City for $500,000 has of doubling or tripling and being worth 1.5 or 2 million because of just, the natural affordability for the average American, right? So playing that game, you can make a lot of money. That was a bit of a rant, but you guys have to deal with that from time to time. Airbnb people, I have an update for you. And I've been saying this to my Airbnb folk out there because I always get that too. Brian, what do you think about short-term rentals? And my response is always, look, I see the ads. They're like, hey, if you got a spare bedroom, you should put it on Airbnb. If you know anybody with a bedroom, it should be on Airbnb, and everybody should do Airbnb. Well, I talked to you about Atlanta kind of shutting down Airbnb. New York City is the latest market to roll out stricter requirements on Airbnb. Once we hit January of 2023, so going into next year, there's a 30-page document of new regulations designed to make it tougher on hosts in New York City. I'm telling you guys, this game, the hotels aren't playing with you. Hotel owners are a conglomerate. They have a lot of capital and a lot of backers, and they suffered through the pandemic. They lost a lot of money through the pandemic, and they want their money back. They want their bread back. And in order to get their bread back, they're going to pay people in lobby and, fund politicians, and they're going to get different things passed that are going to make it harder on hosts nationally. Like, it's not going to stop. It'll hit market by market. It has a stronger chance of hitting a big city than it does of hitting some rural market, like just anywhere in the suburbs. Like there's not as strong of a chance of it hitting somewhere in the suburbs as it hitting a big city. But if you're thinking you're just gonna hop Airbnb in major cities and you're not gonna run into regulatory issues, you are probably. New York is the latest. If you want to do some research, just Google it. New York, 30-page document making it tougher on Airbnb hosts, and have a fun read. They don't have all the info out, but it's 30 pages designed to make it tougher. So I think that's relatively self-explanatory. Like, it's not going to be a cakewalk. It's going to put some people out of the biz. And there are lots of Airbnb properties that are just sitting vacant. I think that number, not in every market, but in a lot of markets, that number is increasing. So there's this article I was reading where there's been an oversupply of Airbnb investors, basically, because there's a lot of ads out about it. There's a lot of new gurus out talking about Airbnb. People are jumping in and everybody thinks they can make money, and they're oversupplying the market with Airbnbs, and then the prices go down or the properties sit vacant, people lose money. So you just have to be careful with that stuff and kind of plan ahead. That's enough for the market update section. Now I'm going to go into some Q&A. If you guys have questions, drop them in the chat. I have some, of course, preloaded questions from people who've kind of, asked me some things over the week. So I'm going to jump into some of that. Drop it in the chat, and we'll kind of keep flowing. So the first question is, the question I got is, can we talk about 5-1, 5-6, 7-1, 7-6, 10-1, 10-6 adjustable rate mortgages? So how do these adjustable rate mortgages work, and what are the pros and the cons? So the first thing you need to know is if you see some type of a mortgage that's like a 10-1 or a 7-1 or a 5-1, we'll start with that, and then we'll get into the 6. What that means is the rate is going to be locked in for that first period, whatever that first number is. So if it's a 5 or 7 or 10, that whatever your rate is, it's going to be locked in. Why do people choose these adjustable rate mortgages? Because they're cheaper in that early stage, in that early lock-in. They're slightly cheaper. As you get outside of that lock-in period, they start to adjust. If rates are higher, they'll adjust upwards and they'll become more expensive. And I'll talk about how much more expensive they can become in just a second. But just know you're basically implementing that strategy to say, I only want to plan on keeping this property for 7 years, then I'm going to sell it. So you might get a 7-1. I think rates are going to go up in the short term for another 2 to 3 years. Then they're going to go back down because we're going to have to get out of this recession time, and the Fed's going to reduce rates. So I'm going to get a 5-1. I'm going to lock in for 5 years at a lower rate than a 30-year fixed, because these adjustable rate mortgages are lower in terms of interest rate than a 30. How much lower? I would say along the spectrum of if a 30 was 7%, a 7 or a 5-1 arm would be like 5.5%. So that's how you can kind of ballpark. It's about 1.5 points, right? So I want some lower rate. So it has to match your philosophy. Or a 10-1 arm, like, hey, I'm going to hold it for 10 years and then I'll figure it out. I'll do a refi. I think rates will be balanced in 10 years, whatever your philosophy is. So that's the 10-1. So how do they adjust after you get out of this fixed lock-in period, the 5, 7, or 10-year period? Well, that's where you get into the 6. So now a lot of these mortgage companies, they're getting smarter, right? And testing what you will deal with as an investor. So they're going from they're throwing out the 1. So they're getting rid of the 1s and they're coming up with the 6s, but it's not a 6-year adjustment. It's 6 months. So they're going to lock you in for 5 years. Then they're going to adjust the rates every 6 months, because now if rates rise faster than a year, they can do another adjustment. It gives them more flexibility to adjust quicker and increase quicker, quite frankly, is how I would think about it, being on the side of the business that we're on. So you have that issue with these 6s, but they're now being pushed aggressively. So they're throwing out these 5-1 arms and just pulling up a 5-6. And you kind of just have to deal with it if that's the strategy that you want to go with. I mean, you're really going for that lock-in period anyway. After we get outside of this lock-in period, here's how these things will start to work. There's going to be some type of a maximum increase for that first year. So after let's say you're in a 5-year arm, and then it becomes annually renewable or every 6-month renewable. They're only going to be able to increase in that first year when you come out of the lock-in 2% maximum. Typically, that's like the number, the industry standard. So if you were at a 5%, even if rates would be at 10%, they could only bump you up to like a 7 in year 1. In every subsequent year, they can go up typically a maximum of 1%. These are also industry standards, right? So you have to check the specific loan agreement for whatever you're applying for. But this is just the industry standard. If it looks worse than this, you should probably shop it around. So now they can keep going up 1%. So let's say, once again, you're in a 5-year arm at 5.5%. Interest rates jump up to 10%. You get out of this 5-year period, rates are on a 30 or like 10%. They can bump you up initially in that first year to 7%, 2%. So there's going to be some type of maximum for year 1. Now we get out to year 2 or the next year, they can bump you up another 1% every year. And then there's going to be some type of a guaranteed maximum in terms of how high they can bump you up in these rates. That maximum will be like 5% or 6%. So that would mean rates can't go higher on your loan, higher than, if you started at 5.5, they can't go higher than 10.5 by contract. Even if rates went to 25%, I don't know what planet that would be on, but if it happened, you would still be capped at a maximum. So that's how these adjustable rate mortgages work. You're locked in for whatever that first number is, the 5 to 7 to 10. Then they start to adjust every year after that. And the maximum they can increase you will be laid out in the contract. It's usually 1% per year after year 1. In year 1, they can increase it as much as like 2% by most contracts. So that's how you need to think about these things. Pros and cons. I mean, the pro is it's cheaper. The pro is more cash flow. If you can get a 5.5% mortgage for the next 5 years instead of a 7% mortgage, you're gonna be collecting more cash flow. So that's the pro. The con is you really have no idea where rates will be after that thing expires. So you're taking on that risk. You want to really know your contract at that point. I wouldn't necessarily call that a con. It's just more of a trade-off. And it's a reason why you need to know some of these macro things we talked about, like where to invest. Are you investing in major cities versus rural areas, knowing that major cities are a bit more stable on pricing right now, less likely to experience big declines, especially if you're staying away from the Sun Belt, the Boise, Idaho's, the Phoenix, Arizona's, and some of these overheated markets, and places like Florida, which are still increasing in pricing. Once again, 10 out of the top 10 increasing price metros, 7 of them are in Florida, in the state of Florida, which is, I mean, that should tell you if Florida is your projected hotspot, you're going to run into some price increases and not the best opportunity. So you may want to look at investing out of town. So that covers that question. Once again, any other questions, drop them in the chat. I'm going to keep flowing. Can I speak to lender seasoning requirements? So I get this, and this is kind of if you're on the buy and hold side of things, if you're on the cash flow side of things, or doing that deep BRRRR strategy, you're going to be asked by a lender they're going to present to you some type of seasoning requirement. So they may ask you, how long have you owned the property, because we have a seasoning requirement. What does seasoning mean? Seasoning means the period of time that you were the official owner of a property. So a lot of people, when they think about the BRRRR strategy, they think, oh, I can just be the king of arbitrage. I can buy a deal, I'm going to spit, shine, rehab it in 5 days, and then I'm going to refinance out 50 grand, and I'm just going to run that more and more and more, and I'm gonna make all this money. No, they have seasoning. Seasoning will mean like, hey, you have to own the property for 6 months before we'll do a refinance on it, or 9 months, or 12 months. It depends on the lender. Most lenders will have at least a 30-day seasoning requirement, which is not, it's not bad. Because it's going to take you 30 days to pretty much do any deal, even if it's extremely cosmetic. To buy it, close on it, clean it up, paint it, and tenant it. It's going to take you a bit of time, right? So just know that you need to check your seasoning requirements. What's a reason, I guess a fair reason why lenders have seasoning is there's a lot of title fraud out there. There's a ton of title fraud. And title fraud can happen when you're moving in and out of deals quickly. Because even though a property can be purchased or sold relatively quickly, the title takes time to go through kind of this old paper-based process and e-recorded deed process. Like in the city of Philadelphia, it takes up to 2 months right now, maybe 3, to get a deed recorded with the city, because the process is just so slow. It's still paper-based mostly, and to some degree, maybe it always will be. Until it goes to like crypto and smart contracts and all this stuff, which hopefully is sooner rather than later. So seasoning allows a lender to kind of pump the brakes on the speed of these transactions between buyers and sellers, so that you can make sure things are recorded with the city, and everything has this like proper check and balance, so that the lenders, the title companies, the different people in between things are not getting burned for serious money. So we have some of that. So just know that seasoning exists, and you just need to know what it is when you're going in to do these refinances. What else do we have here? What's the best way to find a realtor? I got this question. My best way for finding realtors is I will just go like, if all else fails. If all else fails, you can just go right on some of these properties that you like. If you go on Redfin, Zillow, Remax, Realtor.com, and you see a property that you like, there's always going to be somebody who listed that property. A lot of the realtors who will list properties as the seller's agent, they'll work on the buy side as well. I will always just contact them, especially if I'm new to an area, I'm new to a city. I'm just going to reach right out, contact them, say, hey, look, I'm a cash buyer, I'm an investor, I'm new to the area, looking to build a strong relationship with a realtor. You're clearly listing, you look like you know the market. And when you think about it, this can be a really good way to find a investor friendly realtor as a buyer if they're selling the type of property that you want to buy. And not every realtor sells the type of property you want to buy. Some realtors are like, hey, I only sell $1 million listings. They're not going in the C class and selling $30,000 shells. But if you see a $30,000 shell and it's listed by this listing agent, that means they sell $30,000 shells. They play within that market. They're not above it because it's if you think about it from a realtor's perspective, they're making commissions on sales. So a realtor who's willing to hump and just like, hey, I'm moving everything. 30,000, 300,000, I don't care. Any sale, I want all the money. And they're willing to run and work with different investors. That's the type of person you want to build a relationship with. So it's important to stay tapped in at that level, but also to just reach out to some of these sellers, agents who are selling the type of properties that you're interested in. That's an important hack. And for that reason, you can always do your research on, Bigger Pockets and some of these different websites. You can ask for referrals, talk to other investors, go in these different Facebook groups that will have, a bunch of investors in them. There's all these different groups out there. Say, hey, I'm a local investor. I'm looking for, realtors, wholesalers to connect with. People just blow up your inbox. Reach out, but don't be afraid to just reach out and make those contacts. But I really like reaching out to the agents that are listing the properties that I'm interested in because now I know they're going to hustle and they're into moving these types of properties. So they're going to be connected and it's just a way to go outside of connecting with wholesalers, which I've already broken that down in other videos on the YouTube channel. You can tap right in, Brian Loves Cash Flow. You can tap right in through the YouTube and see some of that stuff and learn how to tap in with wholesalers and Craigslist and kind of all that stuff. Somebody asked me for the link to the market research. I'll post that. I'll add that into this video and the last market update video. I meant to do that. So thanks for the reminder. What advice would you give to an 18-year-old trying to graduate high school? Well, I mean, I trying to graduate and then get into real estate, or I'm not sure what that question is. If you're trying to get into real estate and you're 18, I have a ton of advice there, and I don't think anybody. I'll kind of touch on that. I don't think anybody's too young to get into real estate. Like I've heard that I'm kind of young. I'm 20. I feel like I'm young to get into real estate. I don't think so. Like I think the older you get, the less energy you have. I mean that I know. If you're young and you're in your 20s, you have a lot of hustle to you. You can work a 20-hour day, take a nap, get up and do it again, and not owe anything on that. If I try that, I'm gonna pay what I owe at some point. Like I'm gonna crash because I need to get that sleep back. But in your 20s, you have unlimited hustle. Unfortunately, a lot of us in our 20s are out, doing the clubs and hanging out and trying to, present this lifestyle versus taking that energy and pouring it into things like real estate. If you take that energy and you pour it into real estate, you won't make it to 30. Like if you started, for the average person, if they started investing in real estate, knowing very little and started with like $10,000 or $15,000 at 21, they probably retired from the 9 to 5 by 25 to 26. If they took it seriously and really went after it, got their credit right, connected with a realtor, pre-qualification letter, just the basic steps. Get one deal, become a landlord, treat some tenants, well, listen to some sob stories, then have to evict somebody and, turn into whatever they need to turn into to become a serious landlord that collects rent and screens for tenants and does the right things, and then scales that up to even 5, 10 deals and then scales that up again. I mean, they will be out of the 9 to 5 before 30, and permanently. So you're never too young to get started. You're also, on the flip side, never too old to get started, because there's never been a better time to invest in real estate than now because of the technology. I mean, you could be investing clear across the country, sitting in your underwear at your kitchen table with your kid, watching cartoons, eating Fruit Loops, and making money and investing in properties. So, and that opportunity, a lot of us take that for granted. You could not do this 20 years ago. You could not do this 30 years ago. People weren't running around with iPhones. Like, you just couldn't do it. You had to physically go and see the property, or listen to some guy say, "Yeah, it's done. Send a draw inspector. Don't worry about it." And then you send a draw inspector and it ain't done, and you got to worry about it. And then they run off with the money. Like, so now you have ways to protect yourself that didn't exist before. It's a unique time to invest in real estate. Any one of us, anybody listening to this right now, could set up a ads campaign, We Buy Houses, and have motivated sellers contacting them. You don't know how to do it? Hop in one of my my mentorship programs. Ask me. I'll show you guys this stuff. But it's just a unique time to invest in this real estate game and get the ball rolling. So you're never too old, and the timing is just right. It's just right to get started with this thing. Another question in reference to rates. What variance am I seeing between commercial and conventional rates? And this, I'm assuming, would be on like a blanket loan. So like a commercial and a conventional, like blanket loan from a portfolio lender. They're relatively close. I mean, commercial loans, blanket loans, portfolio lenders, these are the people, when we're talking like this too, you want to think QM versus non-QM. So conventional rates, Fannie, Freddie, they are conventional, right? But they're really qualified mortgages. Qualified being you have a debt to income ratio that has not exceeded 50%. So you have a qualified mortgage. Qualified meaning it can be backed by the government and then sold with that government backing to the secondary marketplace. Non-qualified meaning it will not be backed by the government because the debt to income ratio is beyond 50%. Therefore, the government will not put their stamp on it. It can still be sold on the secondary market. It's just a different market. It's truly an investor market. The non-QM space is maybe 20% plus of the total market, which the total market would be the much larger qualified space, conventional, Freddie, Fannie, that type of stuff. So when you're dealing in the non-QM space, the risk premium is higher, right? Because the people who are investing there is truly asset-backed lending. These lenders, they'll write contracts. They have a lot of teeth, but at the end of the day, the asset is what they can take from the average person. Because let's say you go out and you have 40, 50 properties, 100 properties, and you start to default on these properties. Even if you guaranteed everything, they could sue you, but you don't have the money to come up with everything. And everybody knows it because you're way outside of your debt to income ratio, aren't you, on those 70 properties? That's why Bank of America will only write like 3 or 4 mortgages, and they're like, no, your debt to income, sorry, we're done. So the portfolio lender, these non-QM lenders are taking on a higher risk premium. So the interest is slightly elevated. It's not always higher, believe it or not, than the Freddie Fannie loans, especially on investment properties, because even those are considered to be risky. So you might be looking at like a 0.5% difference in some cases. Some cases you might be looking at 0.25%. It really depends on what the lender is doing, what their motive is, because these portfolio lenders, they're private investors. Like, it's everybody. It's a really funny thing when you start to pull back the veil of a lot of lending institutions, especially in the non-QM space, because you just see it's just a couple of guys at a table at the end of the day. Like, they present, hey, we're a national lender, we're very serious, we have to get board approval. The board's like 3 guys that used to be investors that decided to become lenders, and they kind of yay or nay every deal. They just look at it Hey, does the asset make sense? If it does, they yay it. If not, they nay it. And you can build a relationship with those shops and then get better rates. And they might not offer everybody better rates, but for my people out there who are scaling up this thing and doing 10 deals or more per year, 10 deals or more per year makes you a national player. Now, if you want to get up to kind of, the 100 keys masterclass level and start doing 20, 30, 40, 50, then you become like, you need a couple of national lenders to bounce deals between, because you can become too big for even one of these participants. But yeah, 10 deals a year makes you a national player, and you can start to build relationships. If you could bring somebody 10 deals a year, average deal is $250,000, it's 2.5 million. They're originating what 3% origination fees, some junk fees. Maybe they're getting 5% off of you, off of 2.5 million. What's 10% of 2.5 million? 250K, 5%, 125,000. So you represent $125,000 relationship at 10 deals a year. These guys are only making, in terms of profitability, they're only making a couple million, most of them, a year in profits. So you start to think about it at the right level. If you start doing 50 deals a year, now you represent close to $1 million a year in profitability. You do 100 deals a year, you're a multi-million-dollar client to these to these lending institutions. And it's just a matter of scale. And if you want to scale that big, you don't have to make profits for you. You don't need to play at that level to make profits for you, to break free from the 9 to 5, create long-term wealth for your family. You could do 2 deals a year and break free from the 9 to 5, create long-term wealth for your family. And that's why I think everybody should just start to, even if you're not ready to go out and scale up hundreds of deals and all this stuff we talk about at times. Go out and get started, get some deals done, and start building wealth and build a stream of income, so that you're not so dependent on your 9 to 5, so that you can walk into your job and you don't have to tell your dog like, oh, I hate my boss, and like tell everybody you hate your boss. Go in, build some money, have a couple grand, and then you walk into your job and you're like, yo, I'm not taking this. And if you're not feeling it, you'll be freer. And a lot of us, the kind of catch-22 is, when you start to get the money coming in from the real estate, you stop caring as much. So even the stuff you hated about your job, you stop hating it because you're not dependent on it anymore. So you're like, you just become indifferent, because it's just not as personal. It's not as real to you. It just becomes like, well, I'm not feeling them, but my job's my partner now. What does my job's my partner mean? My job is my partner in the sense that I work here. They give me the money to invest in real estate. They don't just give you the money to live anymore. They give you the money to invest in more real estate and to build your financial freedom. I stopped putting money in my 401k. It's like, oh, no, I'm not putting it in the 401. Give me the cash. I'm putting it in the real estate. I'm getting up out of here. And it will just change your perspective on the whole thing. You won't even hate, I promise you won't even hate your job. You can give me the person who's listening to this right now who hates their job the most. If I put a couple thousand a month in cash flow and 5 properties in your hands, you wouldn't even care anymore. You'd be like, well, you probably hate your tenant more than some of your tenants more than your boss. You'd be like, man, they better have that money or I'm filing eviction. You would be more concerned with your operation than the day-to-day job. The job would just be giving you more money, more fuel for the fire. So that's why you guys got to stay tapped into this thing and just keep moving forward. So we got a question. I'm negotiating a deal in Dallas. He's asking way too much, which most of these guys do. 290K on a fire damage property, but the ARV is 425. He's willing to do terms. What kind of down payment or terms should I set up to call a deal? I would need to know a little bit more about the deal, not a ton more, but we have to figure out like the extent of the fire damage. So there's different levels of fire damage. There's, hey, you go up on the second floor and the roof is just burnt out, like you're just staring outside. That's pretty bad. Yeah, if like the kitchen caught on fire or something. I mean, you look at the total rehab. Those margins sound a little tight to me. coming in at 290 and the property only being worth 425? Are you trying to flip it? Are you trying to hold it and cash flow it? These are the types of flip or cash flow, because that's going to be all right. So we're trying to flip it. That sounds a little tight to me, because if you, let's say you're going to use one, you can't really use hard money because you don't have the right spread. My developer spread on a typical deal, I like about a $200,000 cushion between the ARV and the acquisition price. Actually, I like around, I'm mostly looking at multis. I like around a $300,000 spread. So I can put 200K in and still have 100K, a flip profit. So even if I eat into that deal, I go a little over budget, I start dwindling myself down. But it's a nice property. Let's say you had to put in 25,000 to get it up and running. You get in at 290. Let's say you're all in at 325. It could be a nice deal, especially if you have the cash to do it. If you're trying to deal with lenders, the problem with some of these lenders is by the time you pay the lender fees, the origination fees, the doc prep fees, the junk fees, the interest, they start to eat into way too much of your spread. And that's why that number looks a little bit tighter to me. If that was an all cash deal, you could do it all day. I would still just push them down on pricing as much as possible. In terms of terms, I mean, there's a lot of ways that you could set up a deal like that. You just need to see what they're willing to do. Do they own it all cash? Do they have a mortgage? If they have a mortgage, what rate do they have on the mortgage? You can definitely do seller financing, and that's kind of what I'm hinting towards. But in order to do that, you need to understand what's underneath the hood of that property. So what's the mortgage? Oh, we have a mortgage. Is it an owner-occupied mortgage? When did they take it out? Did they take it out 5 years ago? Is it at 3%? Can you take it over? If you can take over those existing payments, you'd be good. Now, free and clear property, maybe you can structure some type of seller carryback. So if they want 290, that's cool, but you're going to carry back 50,000 from the table. So now you only have to come up with 240, and they'll carry a note at 0% interest, and you'll pay them $1,000 a month or something until they're paid off in 50 months. And then you can cash them out of the sale of the property, or do something like that that allows you to come to the table with less money. Because even though a lot of people who own properties free and clear, that's because they don't care about cash. They care about cash flow. If they cared about cash, they wouldn't have just left that property free and clear. They probably would have refied out when rates were much lower and got their cash back out of the deal, right? So amortization, I wouldn't really worry about. Like if you're structuring your own note, the question was what kind of amortization would you add to a seller financing deal? 0%. like going, if he wants the price, he's got to give you the terms. 0% interest, no amortization. Every payment is a repayment of principal. Like, give me the terms if you want the price. Go in hardcore and let them back you down. That's the way to do it. Let them say, oh, I want X percentage, and it's like, yeah, I'll give you 2% interest. Like, structure the deal to make yourself some money, especially on a burnout at the price point that they want. So that is the negotiation. If I could get you the price you're looking for, would you give me the terms? Yes. Okay, I'll give you the price. Give me these terms. Well, I don't want these terms. Well, I don't want that price. So now we're back on price again. So you just keep negotiating hardcore. But if it's a cash deal, what do they care? They don't need all the cash. A lot of people on these cash deals, they don't want all the cash up front anyway. They don't want all that cash from the sale because it's a taxable event in a lot of instances. So they're just like, yo, if I can get some of the money a little bit later or over a duration of time, it's actually better from an accounting standpoint. Especially think about it right now. So if they did a cash sale right now, we're in November, they're going to owe the tax man immediately. Now, if they carried back half of it, let's say you came up with 140 and then they carried back 150, and now they can get those installment payments over the course of time. They don't have as big of a tax hit this year, even if the transaction goes through this year, because they only got the 140 up front. So there's different ways to structure it. So one recommendation is whenever you're doing this stuff, always engage a attorney, a real estate attorney, because a lot of the rules and regulations are micro specific, meaning specific to the municipality that you're operating in. So you can go in with boilerplate contracts and then miss one thing. And then, these contracts don't mean anything until you're in a dispute with somebody. When you're in a dispute, now you're dealing with case law. And that case law is very specific. So you just want to make sure you're completely buttoned up from that perspective. If you want to schedule a call, I'm gonna drop a link into the chat right now. If anybody wants to schedule a call to discuss anything, discuss the one-on-one VIP mentorship program. We teach you guys, everything about real estate, buy and flip, full gut renovation. I've full gut renovated over 300 properties all across the country in the last 5 to 7 years. We just teach you guys the entire game. We also have the group course that's a little bit cheaper than the one-on-one VIP course that teaches you creative financing, structure, and deals. It also teaches you full gut renovation. It shows you just a lot of the game. Just tap in. I'm posting my calendar in the chat. I also post it on the YouTube channel if anybody wants to hop on the calendar and just schedule like a cash flow strategy session. We'll talk one-on-one about 30 minutes and just break down the game, see if any of the stuff would be a good fit for you if you want to work together to build out your portfolios, take your operation to the next level and scale up. We'll get you guys tapped in, man. There's a lot out here for you guys. So nobody should sit on the sideline just saying, hey, I don't have access, or, I don't know who to talk to. Just stay plugged in, stay tapped in. But I just dropped that link in the chat for everybody on the Zoom end of things, so you can tap in there. I'm not sure if there are any other questions, but we've been going for not quite an hour, but we've been going. So I'm not sure if there are any other questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to see if I have any other stuff here. I think I covered everything. Any questions out there going once, going twice, 3 times? All right, we're sold. So that's it, guys. I appreciate you guys tapping in. Brian Grimes, your real estate mentor, here with that market update. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Definitely watch it back because we dropped a ton of game. Definitely watch at least, even if not the Q&A, the front section of this, because there was a ton of game drop, and you need to stay tapped in on that macro level just to make sure you're really dialed into what's going on, because I would say real estate right now is moving faster than I've ever seen it move. And I've been following this thing for quite some time, in it actively. So it's moving quickly, and you just want to keep your foot on the gas, your finger on the pulse with this stuff. So definitely just stay super tapped in here. And if you guys have any questions, click on the link, schedule a call, drop a comment in the chat. Follow me on the YouTube, Brian Loves Cash Flow. Click the links in the bio. That'll tap you into the free trainings and get you guys plugged in. And if you want to talk one-on-one, let's talk one-on-one. Appreciate you guys. Brian Grimes, real estate mentor, signing off. Thank you.